Alright guys, welcome back to week 2. That's my editing software. Week 2, congratulations on finishing week 1. I hope the exercises all went well, and at any time throughout this week, feel free to share your progress in the Discord server throughout any of the weeks. Share any of the mood boards that you made if you want to. There's no pressure to share anything, but anything that you end up making, like it's always great to see what other people are up to and hear about how people's experience has been with the course, like the things that you struggled with, the things that have been good, the things you might need help with, the things that you find are helping you. Maybe you want to share some resources that you found, etc. Feel free to post all of that in the Discord server, because I feel like the more connection we have, the more communication we have between each other, the more aware we are of what's going on in each other's projects, the better we all are for it, because then we have more knowledge, more collective knowledge as a group. And I think I've said before, but we all succeed together. Making a successful game, and even just completing your game, it's not about separating yourself from the rest, although I suppose in some ways it is. But for us as a group, what we're trying to do as a group is work together so that we can separate ourselves from everybody else. Not because there's anything wrong with anybody else, but because we're going to be stronger together, because we're cooperating and sharing resources and everything. And we've got the support, the emotional and like community support. But anyway, so here we go in week 2. Let's crack into week 2. So I hope the visualizations, the vision boards and things like that were good last week. So last week we brain dumped ideas for our game. We explored the emotions that we want to have in our games. We put together vision boards and soundtracks and things. We explored our early influences, and this week what we're going to do is we're going to take all of those plans, and we're going to take all of those moods and emotions and visions and then try to make them concrete into plans. Like, as you can see, we've got a blueprint here on the previous slide, and I've got a tarot card over here on the right. Basically, you can interpret tarot cards a bunch of different ways, but basically the whole art of drawing cards and then looking at the cards is to notice what your reaction is and what you see in the card. And what I see in the card here, it's a psychological tool to help you understand the inside of yourself by noticing the images and the things that stand out to you from that card, what you're projecting onto the card. What I notice here is this little dove dropping this piece of bread or something into this cup, and basically I sort of see this as like that dove coming from above. I sort of think of up here in your brain. It's dropping this idea into this liquid substance of water, which then sort of overflows. And basically this is sort of how I imagine the vision boarding. It's like you're dropping ideas into your body, and now it's like we're going through the process of sort of fleshing out what is otherwise a mental and abstract thing, like a higher thing, a visual thing, imaginary thing, and now we're turning it into water. It's coming from air into water. And now it's starting to take form, so in the form of this blueprint. So anyway, this is where we start to get into a bit of the nitty gritty. There's a lot of stuff that goes into a game, and as you'll see in the next slide, all of this is optional. But so there's a lot of stuff that goes into a game, and as you'll see in the next couple of slides, we'll talk about different ways to tackle of this and what's optional and what's not. But there's no right or wrong way to do a game. But it is helpful to consider, like, if you break down what a video game is, here's just a list of things that could potentially go into making a game. And it's good to understand these and to have this list here. You can refer to this in the future, because it helps you when you're trying to make your plan for your game. It's very easy for the game to remain sort of nebulous in your mind, and then you sort of start to develop, and then maybe you get a couple of weeks in and you're approaching the deadline, and then you think, oh fuck, but I forgot about this, and I forgot about this, and this is taking longer than I thought, and oh my god, we haven't put graphics controls in, and blah 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 blah. And so it's good to be aware of the different parts of the game. So just quickly, I'm just going to quickly read through this. So characters, that includes animation, character art, and also your controls. Blueprints, so character abilities. What is your game loop? Are you going to have scoring? How are you going to handle the game mode? I've got videos on my channel where I do lots of blueprint stuff, so if any of that like words like game mode or character abilities or game loops and things doesn't really make sense, you can browse through my channel and find content there. Environments, level design, lighting, so menus and controls, things like graphics, options, sound and music volume controls, so that might be something that you haven't thought about. The different player controls, main menu, level navigation, save data management, like these are all separate miscellaneous things that are sort of expected in a game, and you don't have to do all of these. It's up to you how you want to, what customization you want to give your player, which we'll talk about. But basically it's good to just know, like, you're gonna have to do a system for save data if you want to save game. You're gonna have to do level navigation if your player's going to be moving between different levels. Do you want them to be able to pick which level they're going to go to next? They're going to be able to revisit old ones, etc. You have to do a main menu, so that involves like a do I have a section for it? No, but so like a logo, links to other social media, probably like a copyright thing. You might have some videos playing, some buttons. Are you going to play? Are you going to erase your save data? Have an options menu, just shit like that. As you can see, like it gets more and more. So let me just blitz through the rest of these. So progression, save data, and achievements. AI, so artificial intelligence, is in enemy behavior or NPC behavior. Stories, world building, writing, cutscenes and cinematics. Performance and optimization, that's a whole thing in itself. Tutorials, so for the player, is how is the player going to learn the controls? That's something worth considering. How are they going to learn how to play the game? Are you going to have a specific level for that, or do you want to sort of teach them passively as they play? These are all things to think about. Feedback and effects. Do you want to have an intro movie that plays on the game startup in the main menu? Controller support, localization, credits, playtesting and iteration, bug fixing, packaging issues, playtesting, which we already had, more bug fixing. Yeah, okay, so I've written that twice because you obviously want to playtest a lot and you want to fix. You're going to be bug fixing a lot as you get closer to the end, and the more playtesting you do, the more you're going to realize that there are more things that you need to fix, like players encounter things on playthroughs that you didn't necessarily see while you were developing the game, because it's very difficult to develop a game in isolation, and one of the best ways to learn what needs to be done next is to get someone else to play it, and then you can watch how they react, watch what they struggle with. You can gauge if they're getting an experience out of it that you think is good, or maybe they're missing things that you think are important, or maybe they're actually fascinated by things that you didn't think were that interesting, and maybe you want to explore more of that. So these are all things that come with packaging and playtesting. And then of course uploading to Steam, so that's a whole task in itself. You need to get an app ID, you need to set up your store details, create graphical assets, a trailer, launch. You need to tell Steam how to launch the game, and then you need to upload your game build and set it live and things like that. There's a whole week where I'm going to show you exactly how to do this, and I've got tutorials on my channels to show you how to do quite a lot of this, and anything that's not on my channel I think I cover in this course. So things like we're going to talk a bit about performance and optimization, we're going to talk a bit about plugins for graphics and things like that, and also how to set up like backups on GitHub and things. We're going to do some of that next week actually. So all this stuff is good to keep in mind. Now, with all of that said, everything in this list is optional. There's no right or wrong way to make a game, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's your game. You can do whatever the fuck you want with it. And what I mean by that is say the thing that you value about games, and you would know what you value about games from your exercises in the previous week where we explored the emotions that you want to create in your game. If the thing that you value is environments, then you're obviously going to spend more time handcrafting beautiful environments than you're going to spend on blueprints and character abilities. And likewise, like even with things like menus and graphics controls, like Nintendo, for example, they often have very minimal controls exposed to their players. They keep their games very simple, and personally, I like that. I don't like games that have a heap of different settings that people control through, and but it's up to you. Like if that is the sort of control you want to give to your players, if you want them to be able to toggle all like hundreds of different graphic settings and different sensitivities for their controls and remap their buttons and shit like that, then that's something that you can do. But it is good to know, and it's very good to think about, well, if I'm going to invest time in that, what are the other things that I'm gonna take that energy from, because at the end of the day, especially as an indie game development, you've got a limited amount of time, you've got a limited number of resources, and you can't do all of this stuff yourself, and you can't do it all to the same standard as like a AAA quality game, because you need to budget and resource your energy. And so what I talk about a lot is the importance of making good judgment and of choosing the things that you want to invest your time into. And that's something that we'll talk more about. But so just to return to this meme, me doing whatever the fuck I want, societal pressure and cultural narratives. The other thing is, when you share your games online to places like Reddit or to other developers, is everybody's going to try and fucking tell you what you can and can't do with a game. They're going to criticize everything that you do. They're going to tell you that you're doing it wrong. They're going to tell you that your game sucks, and or it's missing this and it's missing to that and it's not real, and basically like none of it really matters. And a lot of the time the people that will criticize your game are the ones that have never actually made one, so that's also something good to keep in mind, because making a game is hard, man, and the people who have gone through the process of actually completing a game, like, they're not gonna talk shit about you for using pre-made assets for some part of the game because they understand how hard it is, for example. So anyway, it's your game, but be aware of the time and energy that it will take to implement the things that are important to you. And this is the most important point. It's not about doing everything, it's about doing the things that are important. And then everything else can be good enough, it can be passable, but you want to focus your time on the things that matter, the things that nail those experiences that we talked about in the previous week. What's the emotion that you want your player to feel? That's the thing that you want to invest your time into. You can do everything else. You want to do all the important stuff, the stuff that you want in your game, but then at the end of the day, it is all down to the thing that matters is the experience that the people get. Whether they get the experience what is the experience that you want to give them, whether that comes across. That's the main thing. And so, for example, I've just got down here in one of my games, running Robot Man, for my graphics options, I just had a little sliding bar with 4 different settings. Epic on one side, and then just reduce quality down to just dog shit on the other side, and you just slide it across. Like, you don't have different buttons for the anti-aliasing and the resolution and blah 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 blah, just a little slide bar. I had pretty dodgy UI. I used pre-made assets, and yeah, minimal settings like mouse sensitivity and etc, because it's not important to me. My game performed just fine. Like, there was no issues with the frame rate or anything like that, and so that was it. So next point, which I've already sort of covered, being resourceful as an indie game developer. Indie dev is a big job, and indie games often end up like a mosaic with different bits and pieces from everywhere. You've got to be resourceful. It's good to collaborate with people and to share that load, but if you don't have people to work with, or you've got limited people to work with, you're gonna want to pull resources from the internet. It's just insane to try and do everything yourself. And so we've got a little mosaic on the right hand side here, full of little broken pieces of glass and things, and this is sort of what your game might end up looking like. It's a bit of a patchwork of different systems that you've pulled from different places and different assets, and that's fine, that's good. So let's continue. Use asset packs. Using asset packs doesn't make you a bad developer. A lot of people will try to tell you otherwise. They'll rip on your project for using free asset packs and say that you're not a real developer, or you're not. It's not a real game, or call your project an asset flip and whatever. But they exist on the marketplace for a reason. There's free for a month for a reason, and it's because game development is hard, and people spend years learning how to make scenes like this, and to do systems like I've got my flying AI pack just there, and all other different types of code for multiplayer and for game abilities and for game templates and things. People spend years learning that shit so that you don't have to. And so using asset packs for your game, what it does is it alleviates massive amounts of work that you have to do, because so much goes into a game. It has this added benefit, especially if you consider them early on, of sort of adding constraints and giving form to your game. What I like to do is I like to browse what asset packs are available to me before I even begin to brainstorm how I'll plan the specifics of my game, because knowing what is available for me to work with helps me think, okay, well, if I've got, say, this sort of environment here with this sort of character that might already come with like these sorts of animations. Well, what could I do with that? Rather than coming up with the idea first and then trying to pull bits and pieces from everywhere to like force that vision, I find it very helpful to start the other way around and to start with the tools that are available and just be practical about like what you've actually got what you've already got resources for, what you've got access to, and then use that as part of your brainstorm. It's not to say that you should base your entire game off the asset pack, but that it's sort of like a dance and it's sort of a give and take. Half comes from you and your mind and your ideals and your imagination and all of that, and half of it is the practical element of working with the tools that are actually available. And when you bring those two things together, you can alleviate massive amounts of work, and then through outsourcing that heavy lifting, you can focus on what's important and unique. So this is probably the most important thing, is that people love to pick on, say you use a pre-made environment as part of your game. People will leave a comment and be like, oh, it's just a free asset, like it's not a real game, like what the fuck are you doing, kind of thing. Not realizing that games are about more than just any one part. And by leveraging assets like that to fill in the gaps, now your time is free to actually make your game even more unique. Using tools like this, it actually frees you up to focus on, to be creative and to focus on what's important and to actually add really deep and meaningful elements to your game that make it stand out and to make it different and to make it a great game. You don't actually have the time to invest into those meaningful details if you try to do everything yourself from scratch. And so I strongly recommend that you use asset packs whenever you can. They're there for a reason. Like I said, people spend years and years learning this tech so that you don't have to, so make use of it. And this is just a scene that I pulled for a previous one of my games. I uploaded a video recently where I had this character, which was free for the month. The environment, also free for the month. And I pieced together a bunch of other different environments. I browsed for hours just picking the best sci-fi sort of environments I could find. And I pieced together a trailer. And for me, that was very helpful to prototype and to brainstorm and to add to create a sort of atmosphere. I added some of my own sounds. I had some music that a friend of mine made, and I pieced together this thing and wrote a big story and some narrative. And I'll show you about that in just a second. I've got a slideshow here. But of course I upload it and people hate on it because they see something that was available for free and they immediately, in their mind, they sort of go into defensive mode and they think, oh, like how dare you use other people's work, even though that's exactly what it's for. Great resource. Anyway, so consider, what do you want to hand make in your project and what will you use pre-made assets for? And so it's good to consider this checklist before thinking about all these parts. Which are the parts that you're going to invest your time into and which are the parts that you're going to try and outsource? So for me, I always love doing blueprints. I tend to outsource environments and asset packs. I don't like to do modeling. I like to do level design, etc. You can get packs for menus and controls and and so on. So that's worth thinking about, going through everything in that list and then thinking, do I want to make this myself or do I want to outsource it? Where is my time best spent? And so that's your task this week. So so that's your task this week. What I want you to do is I want you to go to Fab. I want you to browse through the Unreal Engine content and see what assets you've got access to. If you've been using Unreal Engine for a while, chances are you've collected a lot of free content from free for the month. And I want you to browse through all your packs and consider which assets capture the feeling that you described in the exercises last week. So we wrote down in our journal the emotions that we want to try and get across with our game. So now browsing through your packs, think about which ones are going to fill in the gaps and which ones are going to enable you to focus on capturing that feeling and which ones even capture that feeling. So for example, this is Paragon Countess, one of the characters. And I used this for a prototype of one of my games called Esoteric Instinct because I thought she looked otherworldly. She's sort of ethereal, a bit witchy, and that was perfect for my game. And so I imported her to a project. I imported some assets and I knocked up a prototype. And this was great because this also helped me communicate to other developers the sort of vibe that I'm going for with my project. They're great for prototyping, but you can use them in your final game as well. There's no rule that says you can't. That's what they're for. So, you know, use them. And then the rest of the stuff you want to handcraft. But yeah, your task this week, browse through Fab, collect as many of them as you can, and we want to keep them all in one place, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So just let me read this note down here. You can also share packs, plugins, art, and other assets with other devs. So other people in the server, like maybe you've got work that you want to contribute to the server that you want to give to other people to use, and you can swap that for something that they've got, or you can swap that with one of my asset packs. It's so much better and so much easier when we work together like that and we share assets, because yeah, game dev's hard, man. So your second task is to browse the internet for other legal content that you can use or modify for your game. So things like music, things like sound effects, textures, models. You can even use AI tools to generate models, depending on how you feel about that ethically. It's a very complicated topic, but I'm not going to go into that here. And so you might want to also look at tutorials on YouTube. So you might want to save some resources of things that you want to learn for your game. Like if you know that you've never had experience doing a save system, for example, then store a tutorial for that in your playlist, and so that can act as a resource for when you get to that part in your game. You can also click on this resources button to be taken to the end of the slideshow, and down in there you can see some of the videos that I've got where I show some blueprints. You can see where I like to pull assets from, like music and things like that. And so here's what I recommend you do with your marketplace assets and anything that you find here. You want to just build a pool of things that you can resource. So I like to have a folder on my computer, either in Google Drive or just on my hard drive, where I have a file for music, I have a file for sound effects, a folder, sorry, for sound effects, and I like to do slideshows like this where I can store some of my resources. So this is it's sort of a vision board for a project that I'm making, where I'm collecting stories, I'm collecting assets, I'm collecting anything that's relevant to my project. And so what I've done here is I've just saved the screenshots of all of the environments that I want to use. So you can see they've got the names down there: Season 2 Starter Bundle, that one's from Bunker, some sci-fi robots, and then I've got links to them all just here, because it's not actually easy to save them in your Epic Game Launcher all in one place. It's quite hard to navigate, and so keeping these in your brain actually isn't the best. You want to put links to them and write them all down like this, and so then you can easily search them up and then import them to your project when you're ready to import them. So it's good to keep stuff like this together. And so now what I've got here is I've just saved some screenshots of the different environments, and then I've put some notes about what's inside them, so that I can easily re-find these things in the future when I'm looking for them. So for example, I've got down there Mod Sci Interiors, that's the name of the map, and that's a screenshot of my character in the map. Mod Sci Interiors, a screenshot of some of the props. Again, it's better to have screenshots of them all in one place like this, rather than trawling through the project files, because it's so much easier to find them like this. And so I've written there some things that I need to do. So it's going to take some editing of the blueprint doors to get them to open properly, etc. Name of the map, screenshots, an idea for a night map, and then down here I've also got screenshots of where they are in the content browser, so that I can easily navigate back to those maps if I need to, etc, etc, etc. Again, yep, and just brainstorming different ideas. Yep. So that's something that you can do. Put together a slideshow like that. It's very helpful. And so after you've collected some asset packs, what we're going to do next, this is one of your exercises to do this week, whenever you're ready, is pull out a pen and a paper and brainstorm some plans for your game. I think it is also good to do them in a Google slide like this, so you can collect all links to your resources. You can write things out digitally so it's easier to edit. But before you even do that, I think a really good exercise is to brainstorm. So once you've got the packs in mind, do that first, find the asset packs and find your resources. Then get out a piece of paper, get a notepad and a pen, and then just dream. Like, sort of take take those images and those resources that you've got available, and then just let your mind sort of wonder, like, what is it that you're going to make? How's it going to look? So here are some questions to ask. What will it look like? Like, what's the atmosphere going to be like? Where's the player going to go? So places to visit. What's the core gameplay going to be? Maybe you want to draw some diagrams or some images of how your player might move. Maybe you might draw some dungeon designs, like how the rooms are going to connect. So, things like diagrams. Maybe you want to write out some sort of code and some prototyping for some abilities. How's your player going to get through the world? Are you going to write any stories? What are the stories? You can write them on your paper, you could draw pictures on your paper, or you could write them digitally. And what other features do you want to have on your game? So in this brainstorming, I've just written a couple of more points here. Take your time, curiosity is your compass, go deep, and this is your foundation. This is a very important exercise that I want you to take your time with. This is going to sort of lay the foundation for your game. So, spend hours on this, spend days on it even, and return to it. What I like to do when I'm prototyping games is I often take lots of notes in my phone, and I like to go on daily walks, and often while I'm walking, or sometimes during the night, I wake up during the night and I've had a dream or something, and I just jot it into my phone. I jot all my ideas into my phone, and I just brainstorm and just flesh it out. I try to, obviously it changes over time as you develop and you need to get practical about what you can and can't do, but basically I continue to mold this vision in my mind until it gets more and more clear, and it becomes more clear as you develop. But this is just a really fun, and it's a really powerful exercise, and it's very inspiring as well. Okay, and so now this is just the last topic before we wrap up for this week. What we need to introduce is the concept of the minimum viable product, or the lowest hanging fruit, as you can see there in the picture. So the minimum viable product, or the MVP, is what I like to call it. This is a very critical part of game development. So it's the lowest hanging fruit, meaning it's the simplest game that will be playable and that you will be happy with. Absolute minimum number of features to be a viable game. All of the tasks that are in it are non-negotiable, and basically you want to block out the experience in the minimum way that gets across those emotions that are important to you. The absolute minimum number of things that you do to get that feeling across. And then, of course, you can polish, you can make it professional and whatever, but the very first thing that we want to get to is the minimum viable product, meaning a game that the quickest thing that we can get to that captures the experience that we want. And so, for example, here, this is one of my games across on the right, Running Robot Man. And so for my minimum viable product, we'll get into this in a moment, but basically they always take longer than you think, and the games do evolve beyond the minimum viable product, but the minimum viable product, they do always tend to snowball. So anyway, here are some of the features that I had in mind as I wanted to start this project. So one of the things that mattered was I wanted it to be multiplayer, and I wanted it to have fun character movement. So that was important to me. And so just to begin with, I said, we'll have a gliding ability, as you can see here, the double jump and the glide. So super simple. And then a basic single laser, single weapon. You just hold the right mouse button and then click to shoot. So just like that. I wanted to have procedural dungeon generation. So there's some sort of details about how I wanted that to work, but I wanted it to be randomly generated, and I wanted it to be multiplayer. And you were going to explore those dungeons for treasure, so I needed to have a death and a respawn. The players would be kicked back to the hub when they're all dead, and then just a single pickup to collect for a high score, basically, which I don't know if you can see it in the video down there, but that thing gets shot and it drops a ruby on the ground somewhere. Because the players are going to be returning to the hub, I obviously need to build a hub world, so that's something to consider. Need to find some asset packs to that and some level transition logic. And then, of course, I also wanted to do a main menu, some graphics options, controls, etc. So this is sort of a minimum viable product. It's just the basic bare bones of what you want to do. And just notice that included in this isn't things like achievements, skins, cutscenes, stories, heaps of different stuff. I didn't even put controller support in there. Like if you go back to this thing here, lots of this stuff isn't explored. And that's okay because those things weren't important to me. But anyway, so as you can see, is that even though this looks simple, and this is like 5 things, is that the minimum viable product quickly expands into sprawling and like lists of tasks. So for example, like if I wanted to have enemy AI, which I've got here, I've got these enemies that are shooting at you. Making an enemy then expands into all these extra points. So how does the enemy see the player? Who does it target if there are multiple? Like I said, it was a multiplayer game. That isn't something that I thought about until I started to develop. And this is sort of a trend that'll happen is as you make your game and you start to flesh these things out, you'll be presented with more questions that you didn't think about. It's like, how are you going to handle this? How are you going to handle this? How are you going to handle this? And then there's this great quote by Miyamoto, Shigeru Miyamoto, the founder of Nintendo. He said, a good solution is one that solves multiple problems at once. So basically, as you're exploring these MVPs and fleshing out these questions, you're going to have to, you'll develop this skill and you'll get good at developing the capacity to implement solutions or make decisions that address as many different questions as possible. And I can talk about this abstractly now, but I think that's something that you just have to learn from experience. And so that's why it's good to just create this MVP and to start developing and then see how you go, and not to worry too much about it. Like, I'll have this section about scope creep in a minute. Yeah. So we'll get to that. But anyway, so the AI example, how does it attack? Does it use the same laser as the character? And so if it does, which would be good because then that saves me redoing the same logic for what's basically the same ability. If I am going to go that route, then the laser that I make needs to be AI compatible. It needs to be usable by an AI controller, and it needs to be character agnostic, essentially. So, small realization, but something to consider. I'll need to do an animation blueprint. How's it going to be spawned? Is it going to use the same health system as the player? Does it need sound effects? I'll need to go and find sounds for when it dies, when it spawns, when it shoots, when it spots you, etc. And then the performance. Is there going to be a lot of them? Do I need to spend time optimizing the behavior tree? Like this is, I'm not trying to like say all this shit to like scare you or discourage you. This is just trying to reiterate the point that the minimum viable product is important because you want to go minimal because these things, they always expand and more questions come up. So here's another example for the character movement. So when I started to do the character movement, I learned that multiplayer movement is actually quite a difficult thing. I had to get an external plugin. And there's a little video there if you want to watch that. The gliding ability breaks down to finding a parasol mesh, animation blueprint, using the Smooth Sync plugin, and then tweaking the parameters so that it actually feels good. That actually takes time. And you need to settle on parameters before you start to do your level building. And then same with the rolling ability. Find the rolling animations, retarget for my character, figure out a control scheme, animation montages, smooth sync, and then tweak it to be able to actually be effective so that I can dodge. So that's all stuff to consider in your minimum viable product. This is a list of tasks basically that, you know, you'll have these headings of like, okay, I want a replicated dash ability, I want a gliding ability, I want a rolling ability. Then what does that break down into? What are the single actionable things that I need to do? This is a great way to break down your project and a great way to get an idea of the scope, so that by fleshing it out like this and making lists of all the things that you need to do, you're sort of preemptively combating scope creep, because you can watch it snowball on the computer in dot point form and then not have to experience it snowball when you're developing, and you suddenly get in over your head and realize, oh my fucking god, like I'm never going to finish this, it's going to take so long, I didn't think about this, and this. It's good to work it out in your head before you develop. So, but also it can also be good to develop while you're working it out in your head as well, because of the situation of like some decisions aren't clear until you start to develop, and then you begin to see, oh okay, I can reuse this here, and other options like sort of jump out to you. So anyway, a word on scope creep. So scope creep is the phenomenon of your game just getting way too big and you're not realizing how much work is going to go into it. And this is probably one of the biggest reasons why people fail in indie game development. It's why I've abandoned projects before, and it's just because it just takes longer than you expect, and you don't know what to expect if you're new, and it's very easy to just get discouraged. And so I've got this picture over here on the right because this is it says all this and we still met, and basically it's just this insane picture of like planets, and we've got Earth down the bottom, and then we've got probably solar systems and then galaxies and multiverses and shit like that. It's like just this insane, endless, unfathomably immense universe of things. And this is sort of how your game starts to feel once you start develop, is that it starts as this like cute little thing, and then you realize, holy fuck, we've got to do this and we've got to do this, and there's like whole other worlds of shit that you haven't even dived into and start to figure out, and it feels like this enormous universe. So that's a good image to keep in mind when you think about scope creep, and when you're thinking about your minimum viable product, is just keep in mind what goes into making a game. And so scope creep is a real danger, but, and this is a big but, there's no way to predict scope creep except from experience. Opinions of teachers, peers, and people on the internet can only be guides, and you need to learn how to judge it for yourself. People will always criticize your plans for your projects, but nobody knows what you can and can't do except for you. And you can take advice from people, you can take advice from me. I can tell you to do a minimum viable product, and people can tell you to reduce your scope, and maybe they're right, but I don't think you should listen to them. I think what you should do is you should learn for yourself. You can take advice from people that you trust, but you're not actually going to understand what scope creep is and what the significance of the minimum viable product until you actually try to develop a game yourself. And so I think it's a lesson that you need to learn yourself. And as you go through it and you make your minimum viable products and then learn through experience from trying to develop them, you'll learn how to make good judgment, and you'll learn what is and isn't reasonable, what is and is not reasonable in a given amount of time, how long things take, and then you can have reasonable expectations. But nobody else can tell you, so don't fucking listen to anyone. Learn it for yourself. Okay, and so last task for the week, I think, is you're going to make a minimum viable product. So do this in an online document. I like to use iCloud Notes because I can access that from my phone, and then I can open that on my computer. You can see I've got my tab open there. I can open that on my computer, and then when I'm working, I can go through my tasks and check them off in Unreal Engine. And then, yeah, when I get ideas out of my walks, I can open my phone and I can adjust my notes and everything like that. So it's good to have access to it on your phone wherever you end up doing it, because it's good to have it portable, basically. And so in that document, but you can do it in Google Docs, you can do it wherever. In that document, you're going to list every single task that you need to complete to reach a minimum viable product. Be conservative with your minimum viable product, obviously. Try not to have a massive reach, although, like I said, you're gonna learn this for yourself. And it's okay. You're going to adjust this as you go. So if you realize that it's too big, we're going to adjust it as we go to make sure that we finish on time. So it'll change over time. And if you don't know all the tasks that go into making your game as well, that's also okay. You're not going to know. If this is your first game, or even if you've done games before but you've never done a game like this one that you're going to make, it's impossible to know. It's impossible to know what to expect, but you just have to do your best. You have to make your best guess, and then as you go, it becomes more clear. And so here's an example. Here's an example of an MVP, a very top level MVP. So I need to build a hub world, which means I need to find an environment pack, assemble a level, do lighting and post-processing, find music, and a portal blueprint to travel to the game level. Okay, so this is an example from Running Robot Man, I think. Character abilities. I want to jump, a crouch, a dash, and shooting. That's already quite high level. What do you mean by shooting? Like, you need to elaborate these things into actionable tasks. Animation blueprint, damage system. What are the features that you want? Do you want to have health? Do you want to have animations play when things die, etc.? Do you want to have health bars? List all of those things out. I need a main menu. On my pause menu, these are some things that I want on my pause menu. Whoops, I just fucked that up. Graphics options, control scheme, no remapping. It can be good to specify the things that you're not going to include as well. I'm going to have to do a tutorial level, and just for an MVP, I've written here, I'm going to use basic text render actors to explain the controls. So it's not going to be an elaborate tutorial. It's just going to communicate to the player with text. So that's a good, very basic minimum viable product tutorial. And then obviously I'd like to improve that in the future, but for the first milestone, the minimum viable product, this is what I'm going to aim for. I'm going to have a single game level to be a minimum viable game, I just need a single level. I don't need multiple. I don't need a huge campaign of 100 different quests. Just one will do to start. So for that, I need to find an environment pack. I'm going to build some platforming geometry, and I don't even need AI for the first one. It's just going to be platforming, okay? Simple. And then a credit screen. I want a credit screen as well, so that's something worth considering. And how are you going to get to the credit screen? Well, it's going to open after a portal at the end of the level, and then it's going to return to the main menu after. So that's the entire game. It's not as detailed as it should be. It should be more detailed than that. You're going to list all the actionable tasks like we had up here somewhere. Yeah, like shit like this. All the things that you need to do. But just do your best. Okay. So that's your task for the week. And now here's some advice. The art of game development is in choosing the right things to do. I'm going to harp on about this again and again and again. It's about choosing the right thing to do. It's not about doing everything, because you can't. And by trying to do everything, you can't do the things that are important and that make your game unique. And so the things that make a good game are for you to decide. That's an important thing. And follow your enthusiasm as well. You also have to consider the economy of your energy, meaning what do you have the energy to do? Maybe the right thing is to actually do what's easy rather than trying to do some complicated feature that you need to go and watch a tutorial for and then troubleshoot and etc. It depends what you want, and like maybe your project is a learning experience as well, and that's also fine. Be open to change. So your plans are going to change as you go along, and that's to be expected. Scrap what doesn't work or what is too hard, and you don't know what's reasonable until you start. So just start and change your plans as you go. And we're going to talk more about development logs later on. But anyway, so here are your tasks for the week. Find some asset packs, explore some free resources and collect them all in a single place, make a minimum viable product, and then an optional one is to start fiddling around in Unreal Engine. So import some of your packs, play around, make some levels, make some character abilities, just fuck around and have fun. Don't take it too seriously just yet. We'll get more serious in the next week. It's where I'll show you like the project setup and that. So that's it for today. Good job on making it to week 2, and all the best for the week ahead. Go get it.